Okay, so this is the official welcome to the Buddhist Winter School session number, I think 6 or 7, something like that. And I am, the original title for this was Start with Your Own Heart for this session. And as sometimes happens, I had prepared something. I don't always prepare something. I sometimes just go with the flow. I had prepared something, but then at the last minute, I decided that doesn't feel right. So I'm going to do something a little bit similar, but a little bit different. Excuse me, I had a little bit of a cold. So I want to talk about who you are, who we are in the ultimate sense, not in the sense of our personal identities, you know, who we think we are, the names we have, the labels we ascribe to ourselves, male, female, non-binary, trans, whatever, straight, gay, bisexual, poly, whatever, Australian, American, British, Irish, European, whatever, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, the sensations we have, the bodily history we have, the history of being in this body. I'm not talking about that. Those things are temporary, fleeting, and beautiful, definitely valuable, but they're not at all who you are or who we are truly in the absolute sense. So I want to talk a bit about Garbha or Buddha nature. This talk initially was meant to be about our true worth. And I mean, I could do this talk in a sentence. Our true worth, our true value is our Buddha nature. That's the talk done. But to convince you, I'll go over a little bit. And I will draw also on some actual masters rather than just little old me sitting here. So I'll share some great teachings with you from actual real masters. So, but I want to start out by saying, in our nature, we are no different to the Buddha. So the phrase in our nature, and we all probably have heard this so many times, but if we have any negative feeling about ourselves of any kind, we haven't taken that to heart. If we have any judgment about ourselves or others in any way, we haven't taken that to heart. It's impossible to have any kind of like positive, negative, feeling about others if we've accepted that in their nature they are the Buddha. It's impossible to have any sort of negative feeling about ourselves if we have accepted in our nature we are the same as the Buddha. There's no room for anything other than joy, love, compassion, and evenness or equanimity if we've accepted that. If we haven't accepted that, we judge ourselves and we judge others. We feel separate from others. We feel either superior or inferior or neutral towards others. And all of the things that torment us and ruin our lives rise from that lack of recognition. So all the nasty things, greed, jealousy, anger, hatred, misery, sadness, anxiety, panic, all of those rise from that misrecognition, from that failure to look to our true value, to look to what is actually real rather than constructed, fabricated, and illusory. All of our misery comes from not having accepted that, step one. Step two, encountered that in our practice. There's no other cause of misery. It's that is it. Grasping, self-clinging, all of that which causes misery and suffering arises from that lack of recognition. In the Tibetan tradition, I'm not sure if you're all what sorts of traditions we're in here. I think it's a mix. In the Tibetan tradition, we have a meditational deity or yidam that represents the part of ourselves that's always been in a state of recognition. There is a part of ourselves that's always been in a state of recognition, has never departed from that state of recognition of our true nature, never will, cannot. And the yidam or representation of that, we call that Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri together, actually. Union of Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri. That, I'll just talk about that yidam or meditational deity for a little bit. That, we don't need to do yidam practice necessarily. Just want to talk about it to give you some sense of what that means. That yidam deity, Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri in union, they've never been confused. They have never experienced suffering. That's what those yidams represent if we meditate on them, if we use them in our meditation. We're entering into that part of ourselves that's always been there, but is currently obscured, that recognizes our true value. Using all these words, we, our, etc. Of course, they're nonsense on a certain sort of level, because they point to what is fleeting, what is passing, what is fabricated, what is an imagining. It's a mirage on the horizon. It's no more substantial than that. But that true nature, our Buddha nature, that's unconditioned, which means it was never created, it was never born, and therefore cannot be diminished, cannot be stained, cannot pass away, is undying. That's where our true value is, in that nature. It's the same nature as the Buddha. So, given that there is a part of ourselves that already recognizes that, but it's buried, what can we do? How can we enter into that state of recognition and stay in that state of recognition? Entering into that state of recognition has a couple of stages which we give words to. First off, to really be confident in our Buddha nature is to be liberated from disturbing emotions. So that's what that word liberation means. To be liberated from disturbing emotions can only be done by accepting our true nature and also the true nature of all other beings. This has to happen together, and it does actually naturally happen together. When we see all beings, human beings, other animals, insects, birdies, as the Buddha, in their nature the Buddha, there's no negative experience with other beings. And if we see ourselves in the same way, whatever rises in the mind, whether that be labelled good, bad, or neutral, it doesn't shake that state of knowing what we really are, what all beings really are. So we're liberated from those things. If we are in a body, which of course we are, stuff will trigger sensations, feelings, emotions, and they will continue to rise in the mind with less frequency, but they will immediately dissolve in that state of knowing who we are. It's just like, it becomes just like something quite funny. this stuff just rises and it just passes, and it's kind of amusing and funny. So that's the first thing. If we have confidence, it's felt, but it's also at that point largely intellectual. You know, we just have confidence. We've read about Buddha nature, we've listened to actual masters, and we believe them. We have trust and confidence that they are telling us the truth. This is our ultimate nature. So we develop an intellectual confidence which becomes a felt confidence, and then disturbing emotions are liberated. It's not that they don't rise anymore, they just dissolve in and of themselves without any intervention, without any antidote being applied. That's the first thing that happens. When we become confident, we gain, the phrase I use is gain certainty, that in our nature, we are the Buddha, all sentient beings, every single one equal. Then the next step is what we call realization. It's an interesting word. And that simply means you've gone from intellectual certainty to a real lived experience of your nature. In meditation, whatever form of meditation you do, slowly, 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 all these adventitious thoughts, sensations, emotions settle, and already there, just waiting to be found, is our true nature, naked awareness, which has only a few qualities: love, compassion, joy, equanimity. You're also said to have things like stillness, clarity, movement, but that's ultimately it's the four immeasurables. So then we have realized our nature, right? So the emotions are already dissolving of their own accord. They just rise, pop like little bubbles, you know? Then when we actually have a really felt direct experience of our nature through the practice, that's called realization. And for the first period of time when that happens, people can be in and out of that state of recognition. And so then the practice is to learn to stabilize that. And then the final thing that happens is when, like the masters, they abide in that state all the time. They're there all the time. That's what we call enlightenment. So these three things, liberation, realization, enlightenment, they're all about Buddha nature. Recognizing Buddha nature, directly experiencing Buddha nature. So accepting first that it is true. Directly experiencing it in our meditation practice or whatever other practice we're doing. And thirdly, being so kind of immersed in the practice that that recognition becomes permanent, stable, and we're awakened, we're enlightened. So that's kind of an overview of if you take your nature as the path, you know, what it will look like. First, come to an intellectual point of trust and confidence that this is true. Second, sit in meditation. Doesn't need to be any kind of fancy thing. In Tibetan Buddhism, we have all these hierarchies of practices, you know, but fundamentally, shamatha practice is the foundation, and it will naturally evolve into vipassana, insight, and then into other things. Naturally, it will evolve if the heart's in the right place. So really just start there with shamatha, and then over time, what becomes like a glimpse of one's nature, which we can all glimpse right now just by sitting quietly and looking to the gap between what's going on in the mind. You know, we can all just, my cat does that. This is not a rarefied thing. You know, kitty cats look into the gap. You see them doing it. We can all do that too. Just look to the gap. It'll be very fleeting, very fast. We might not even recognize something there. If we just keep sitting, eventually that gap elongates and it becomes quite luminous. And then from there, magic happens. I don't want to go into it too much. So what I want to do for the rest of this time is share with you some really great pith instructions from the masters of our tradition, the Buddhist tradition, starting with the Buddha, and then kind of focusing, and then one little quote from the Indian Buddhist tradition, and then really focusing in on, the Buddhist tradition in Tibet. The kind of really kind of like pithy, concise instructions that they've given about how do we do this? How do we take our nature as the path, right? But before I do that, because I don't want to get sued, I did say I would talk about self-compassion a little bit. And I think I can do that pretty quickly. And I'm not being blasé here. But self-compassion can be a very tricky thing. We need to get the balance right. So, as you all know, if you came to the Jetson's talk about Lojong is mind training. Training the mind to be what? Training the mind to be kind. Training the mind to be compassionate. Training the mind to be ethical. It's pretty basic. Training the mind to be calm and unreactive. So the quickest way to move into a state of kindness or compassion is to stop thinking about ourselves. It seems a little bit harsh. I mean, I'm technically supposed to be talking about self-compassion, but honestly, the kindest thing we can do for ourselves is to stop focusing on what's going on here. This light show, circus, is not really important. We need to take care of ourselves and be gentle with ourselves and be kind towards ourselves, of course, because we're sentient beings. We do that with all sentient beings. But this idea of how to show self-compassion, right? People go, I struggle to show self-compassion. The quickest way to feel compassion, right, which will permeate your entire being, is to stop thinking about ourselves and start focusing on others. And then, but this is not necessarily like go out and be a charity worker. Volunteer at a soup kitchen, work in an animal refuge. All those things are really good, and encourage you to do them. I would like to do those things myself and do those things if I can. But real compassion for all sentient beings, including ourselves, is to sit in meditation. Because if we're trapped in a burning house and we are blindfolded as well, there's no point shouting directions to the others trapped there with us. That's not kind. That's just confusion. If we want to really help others escape and help ourselves to escape, we have to take the blindfold off, and then we can see the exit. So real self-compassion is to sit in meditation. And then we can take the blindfold off. We know what reality is. We know what our true nature is. Then we can guide others out of the fire. I mean, really, we can just get ourselves out for starters. Because at the moment, if we're focusing on the thoughts, emotions, sensations, and things that are rising in the mind, as that is me, and that deserves to be treated kindly, yes, it does. We don't treat that badly, of course. But if that's our focus, that's all temporary, fleeting, passing, and quite fabricated, quite a construction, an illusion, a mirage. So if that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're trying to comfort and be tender towards, it just will feed the confusion. So we shift our focus from that onto all sentient beings, and we do our practice. Obviously, if we have trauma, anxiety, depression, sadness, we need to do something about those things. Counseling, medication if need be, self-care, rest, good diet, all of those things. They're really super important. But the only long-term cure to disliking oneself, to low self-esteem, to self-hatred, is to sit and to find that true value, our true nature. Because so long as we pander to that effluvia, I'm not sure if that's even a word, but that effluvia in the mind, we will never, ever, ever be free of it. So all of the other teachers in this Buddhist Winter School have all touched on this, and really well. So I think you should watch those videos too. But honestly, for me, the point I want to make is, you can't overcome self-loathing and lack of confidence and low self-esteem by focusing on that. We need to shift our focus to our true value, our true worth, which is our Buddha nature. So as I said, I'm going to share some quotes with you. And because this is a spur of the moment thing, I don't have any pretty slides. So I'll just read them out. I'll read them out kind of carefully and slowly so that we have time to hear them and take them in. So the first one is from the Buddha. And I want to just point out that oftentimes the Tibetan tradition, which focuses on taking your own nature as the path, is seen as a movement away from early Buddhism. But this quote from the Buddha shows this is not true. The Buddha said, "Look to your own nature, which is intrinsically pure, and rouse yourself. Look to the purity on which the world is founded, and correct yourself. Look within and find happiness." I might repeat that. I think in this teaching from the Buddha, we have everything. Look to your own nature, which is intrinsically pure, and rouse yourself. Look to the purity on which the world is founded, and correct yourself. Look within and find happiness. I mean, I don't know about you, but I find that very moving. So I want to just talk about that a little bit. There's a lot there. First off, the idea that looking to one's true nature is some rarefied, secret Tibetan thing, clearly not true. The Buddha encouraged us to do this. The Buddha talked about the purity upon which the world is based, and said, look to it and correct yourself. So by rouse yourself, what does the Buddha mean? Get motivated. Look to your inner nature, pure, perfect, vast, boundless, unborn, undying, permeated by love, joy, compassion, evenness. Look to that and rouse yourself. Get motivated by that. So that's step number one. The whole path is here in this little quote. Number two, look to the purity upon which the world is founded and correct yourself. What does that mean? We see the world from this distorted perspective of the dualistic mind. Our perception is hard word is not quite the word. Our perception automatically distorts. It creates the sense of I'm here and you are there. That's not true, but our senses construct that. Our senses construct. I'm here, you're there, there is distance, there's a sun, there's a moon, there's all this stuff that's all separate, none of it unified, all solid, not fluid. If we sit in meditation, recognize our true nature, and then look to the world, we begin to see its fluid nature, its beautiful impermanence, its luminous nature. So all of the things that cause us so much suffering, thinking of ourselves as separate and therefore small and therefore alone and therefore, somehow imperfect, looking at other things as permanent, and then being constantly rudely told by the world itself, actually, no, that's wrong. Nothing's permanent. That's what's the source of all our misery. So the purity upon which the world is founded is the same purity upon which the mind and our own nature is founded. It's the same thing. So the Buddha here is saying, if we're strictly speaking, talking about the Tibetan tradition, we would call this essentially a Dzogchen teaching, highest kind of teaching. This is in the early sutras. It's not restricted. It's not secret. We just have to pay attention to this and understand that this is there from the beginning of the Buddha's teachings. And then the last part of that quote, look within and find happiness. The Buddha wants us to be happy. The very motivation, the Buddha's first step onto the path was motivated by compassion, saw sickness, old age, and death, and was not happy with that, could not let it be. So left everything behind and started his spiritual journey that led to his enlightenment. So that compassionate impulse is there from the very beginning. It's not an addition. The Mahayana tradition is not an addition. It's the culmination of that first moment of the Buddha. So understanding that the Buddha knows we want to be happy, I think is important. But where is that happiness? The Buddha says, look within and find happiness, not do a whole heap of stuff and create happiness. Go forth and do stuff to make yourself happy. No, look within and find happiness. I'm labouring this point a bit. It's not make, it's not create, it's not produce, it's not solve your problems so that you can be, it's not fix yourself so that you can be. It's just simply look, and there it is. It's there already. It's our nature. The word happiness, we could have lots of debates about translating from Pali and Sanskrit, etc. I think this is one of the Sanskrit sutras, I think. So about what that word happiness really means. What does the Buddha really mean? And I think it means joy, love, compassion, evenness. It's one word that contains that sense of joy, delight, love, compassion, kindness, evenness, which means to just be really content with whatever arises in the mind and with whatever we experience, and to just really be at peace, So I think there in the Buddha's teaching, we see quite clearly an instruction: take your nature as the path. Look to your own nature. Look to the pure nature of the world, which is the same as your nature, and find happiness. It's there really in the very early days of the Dharma. So I'll share another quote with you, if that's okay. This one is from the sort of classic period of Buddhism in India. It's from the Uttara Tantra. You can Google that if you want to know what that is, but it's basically a set of teachings about our ultimate nature. So the Uttara Tantra says in one part, the absolute is one undifferentiated whole, and the potential of Buddhahood exists in every living being. Therefore, forever and anon, all that lives is endowed with the essence of the Buddha. So we need to accept that all that lives is endowed with the essence of the Buddha, irrespective of time, space, or place. That has to be accepted. It's fundamental. So we can't think, I have Buddha nature, but Donald Trump does not. We can't think like that. We can't think human beings have Buddha nature, but scorpions do not, snakes do not. We can't think like that. We have to accept that all sentient beings have Buddha nature and really get it. You know, so we read things like this, the Untitled Chapter, the Buddhist teachings about these things. We read, then we contemplate, which means to think through. Okay, what does that mean? What does it mean that all sentient beings, including ourselves, are in their essence the Buddha? What does that mean? And then we need to apply. These three things have to go together: to learn, to contemplate and reflect, and then to apply. And apply has two parts. So we think, we read and we go, oh, all beings in the essence are the same as the Buddha. All beings. I'm included in that. And so is the ant crawling on my foot. You know, so all beings. Okay, right. What does that mean? You know, it means that all beings need to be treated equally. That's step number one. Number two, it means all beings have the sacred presence of enlightenment as they are already, as they are now. They don't need to fix themselves. They already have the sacred presence of enlightenment. So including ourselves, so we need to treat all beings accordingly. There's no point. There is no point treating some beings more favorably than others. It's a contravention of what is true, you know. So what does that mean? That's the reflection bit. Then apply. How do we apply it? Two ways: live ethically, treat beings well, be kind, be compassionate to ourselves as well, kind and compassionate to the self as well, with the understanding that we're not being kind and compassionate to this, the fluvia that's passing through the mind, but to our true nature. And then the second part of application is probably the most important, which is to bring the understanding from the head down into the heart. And that's only done through sitting in meditation. So you contemplate, after having read, you contemplate, then you sit. You sit in meditation, and you're not thinking about what you've read. You're not thinking about what you think that means. You're just letting it all naturally drop down into the heart. And you just, you sit. So our practice should always be a little bit of study, the pith instructions, quite a bit more reflection and contemplation. What does that mean for me, for the world? Then a whole heap more sitting, practice, what we call practice, which I'm not a huge fan of that word. I think to be, in a state of calm in the present moment with oneself, with experience. And then the understanding drops down into the heart and becomes a lived experience. So from then on, you start to see with your eyes and hear with your ears the presence of the Buddha in all things. At the moment, our perception distances us from the truth. But once it starts to become live in the heart, the perception changes, because it's not driven by the dualistic mind so much anymore. While we're alive, there will always be that component. But it starts to become, softer. The sense of separation between oneself and others dissolves little by little. The feeling that we're somehow separate and small, and that dissolves. The beauty of impermanence begins to shine, rather than be something that upsets us, that causes us to feel pain. It shines, So it's kind of simple what we need to do if we take our nature as a path, as the Buddha has instructed. And now we've seen the entire Tantra, which is a very important Tantra to Tibetan Buddhism, to Tantric Buddhism, also instructed. You know, it's simple but not easy, because our senses, our perception, our worldview, all the emotions, thoughts, and feelings and sensations that are triggered by that distorted perception reinforce the opposite. You can't undo all that by thinking, by trying to work it out. The Buddha gave us practices to do, meditations to do. They undo it. And we need to pay attention. That's what we need to do. We need to rouse ourselves, get motivated, and sit and, you know, accept the truth of Buddha nature, and then sit until it becomes a lived experience. So I'll share another little quote with you now. And now we're moving forward in time. This is from the great Chan Master Huangpo. Huangpo is the first Buddhist master that I encountered through books when I was very young, and continues to be really important to me. And the writings of Huangpo are really precise and clear. They're very interesting and widely available, not secret, not esoteric, not hidden away. You know, this is from the Mahayana tradition. There's no restrictions on this. So Huangpo said, the mind is Buddha. Buddha is the mind, which is infinite void, without boundaries, without name and form. So here we have something that's important in this process if we're going to take our nature as the path. So, and that's this idea of not taking the self as the path, which is just poison. We're already doing that. We're already taking our self as the path, paying attention to its wants, its aversions, its biases, its foolishness, its meanness. We're already doing that. We're already taking the self as a path. So to take one's nature as a path, we need to have some sense of shunyata, of in that quote, it was translated as voidness. There's many kind of levels to shunyata, or I'm trying to avoid saying emptiness, which is not my favorite way of translating that word. But there are many different layers to it. But the fundamental basic thing is it's not graspable, and it's paradoxical, and it's profoundly open and rich. Plus there's this other stuff, which is compound, interconnected, fluid, so not permanent, not a separate self-existing entity, all these sorts of things. So the danger of taking our nature as the path is taking the self as a path and thinking we're doing something great. And oftentimes you see, often people who look like a little bit like me wearing white, actually dancing about, doing whatever they want, you know, I'm on the, taking the nature as a path, which there are Tibetan words for, but fundamentally they're taking their ego as the path, and their libido actually often is the path for them. So we need to be careful of that we're legitimately taking the empty but cognizant nature of our true self, a true nature, as the path, not this deluded, dualistic, compound, fabricated self as the path. That's important. And the way to know is, am I taking my own whims as a path, or am I taking my own nature as a path? Are we becoming kinder, more generous, more open and relaxed? Are people no longer annoying us? Do we not get cranky at 3 PM anymore? Are we sleeping better? It's often, that's an ignored but often very good sign. We're sleeping better. Go sleep like babies because we're not ruminating. There's not stuff going on there. Do we feel warmly to people even if we once found them annoying and they're still doing the same stuff? Doesn't matter what they're doing. We still feel warmly for them. That's how you know. If those things are happening, becoming kinder, more even about things, more loving, more relaxed. Relaxed is important. Then you're on the right path. But fundamentally, the path the Buddha set out is not complicated. Sit. Sit still. Let your nature shine by just letting everything settle down. And of course, live ethically, be kind and compassionate where you can. So we're now going to jump forward. It's actually a similar kind of time frame. So Padmasambhava, those of you who are not in the Buddhist tradition of Tibet might not know who Padmasambhava is. In Tibet, Padmasambhava is known as Guru Rinpoche. It's considered the second Buddha. So Padmasambhava was from Haryana. There's some debate about where Haryana was, but at the moment we're kind of thinking northwestern Indian subcontinent. And he went to Tibet in around 750 CE, Common Era, and established Buddhism there, and established what we call the Dzogchen tradition, which is the tradition that takes one's nature as the path. But also remember, the Buddha encouraged us to do this, and the Mahayanas were doing this as well. So it's not actually unique to Tibet. He gave this description of what the mind is like. He said, in its true state, the mind is naked, immaculate, clear, without duality, transparent, empty, timeless, uncreated, unimpeded, not realizable as a separate entity, but as the unity of all things. There's nothing I can say to add to that. It would be a little bit embarrassing if I attempted to add to that. I just would say that in that quite short pith instruction, we see some things emerging that we can look out for in our meditation. Clarity, luminosity is another word for that. Often when we meditate, and I've been doing so for a while, experiences like oneness and unity and this sort of thing, they emerge. So that's often, but not necessarily always or routinely, a sign that we're on the right track, that our meditation is deepening. I don't really want to say much more about that because I think that's perfect in itself. I might just repeat it. In its true state, the mind is naked, immaculate, clear, without duality, transparent, empty, timeless, uncreated, unimpeded, not realizable as a separate entity, but as the unity of all things. So we'll just let that sit for a minute. So, apart from simple silent sitting and acknowledging and accepting that in our nature, we and all sentient beings are exactly the same as the Buddha. You know, what do we need? So this depends on your tradition, you know. So I'll talk from mine because I am embedded in a certain kind of tradition. So in my tradition, the easy way of, you know, doing this, taking our nature as a path, has shamatha, which should naturally evolve into vipassana, which means to get some insight into the nature of the mind. You can do some little questions to prompt that as well, which is contemplation. Then that will evolve naturally into other practices that I'm not going to talk about here, other states or meditation styles, that these will just evolve naturally. That will happen more easily, according to my tradition, if our heart is awake. So awake through either compassion or, my preference, devotion. So the minute I say devotion, some people tense up. As you can tell, it amuses me a little bit. So compassion and devotion are the same taste. They're open heartedness. They're of our ultimate nature. Now, compassion, because while we're still on the path, is very easily mixed in with, I want to be a good person, so I'm going to be compassionate. I want to be seen as a good person, so I'm going to be kind. I want to be thanked for what I do, therefore I'm going to do compassionate and kind things. You know, it can very easily be folded into our construction of ourselves, of who we are, you know. And the dualistic mind, which you can call it ego or whatever, it really likes to be seen in a positive light, loves it, in fact, likes to be praised, likes to be thought of as smart, really, really, really loves to be seen as a spiritual entity, you know, practitioner, all these kinds of labels, smart, wise, worldly, you know, on the ball, clued in. The dualistic mind loves that. And so it will take whatever we do and try and poison it. However, it's almost impossible for that to happen with devotion, because devotion is predicated on a surrender of the ego from the beginning. So, and also people often will go, oh, you know, Tibetan Buddhism is its fixation on devotion. It's not, you know, really Buddhist. But if you look at the early sutras, and I mean the early ones, and actually all of them, there's a tone of devotion there towards the Buddha that's undeniable. The relationship all of the early practitioners had with the Buddha was one of devotion. If you read the Therigatha, which is the poems of the early, the elder nuns, the first nuns, those are infused with devotion all the way through. There's also insight into emptiness, great compassion, great renunciation, understanding the nature of the mind, understanding of how meditation works. It's all there in the early nuns' poems. But there's also this thread of devotion that goes through everything. So devotion is there from the beginning of the Buddhist path. From the very first time the Buddha spoke to the first five, you know, and all of those who attained liberation, realization, the arhats, the early arhats, all were devoted to the Buddha. So this is not a Tibetan oddity or weirdness. So, and the thing about devotion is, in this day and age, it's very unpopular because we've got some creeps creeping around doing very unethical things, staining the practice distorting it, abusing their disciples or students. So obviously these days we go, and we feel a little bit frightened, a little bit uneasy. A good friend of mine once said, I don't want to hand over my autonomy to anyone. And I understand that completely, but at the same time, devotion will bring you to a state of total autonomy quicker than anything else. You will not be beholding to the dualistic mind anymore. It will be subdued. Devotion awakens the heart really fast, very fast. And then the mind quiets down. A mind that's full of love or compassion or devotion is a quiet mind. And then the true nature shines through. And then you see, actually, this devotion, this love, this compassion, these are the natural expression of the nature, our nature, So, but if we're like, I have been abused in the past, unfortunately, there are many, many of us, or I am wary of abuse, you don't need to have a living teacher. You can use the Buddha as your object of devotion. So as with every practice, we have an object. Meditation has an object. It's either looking at something or the breath, right? That's the object of meditation. With devotion, the object is a living teacher or an enlightened being who has lived. So the Buddha would do. Also, any of the arhats, including those early nuns, would do. Any great master, male or female, from any point in history will do. But you need to feel something for them to start with. Respect, admiration, just their life story, moves you, does something for you. Devotion will open the heart, settle down the mind, and then the luminous nature will shine, I know this is probably an unpopular thing for me to say. And I think that's sad, actually, because if we can't feel devotion for the Buddha, how are we going for refuge? What does our refuge mean if there's no devotion there? It's not refuge. It's some game, If we're not surrendering and opening our heart to the Buddha or to our teachers or whoever, Yeshe Sogyal, who was the first woman to be enlightened in Tibet, if we're not opening our heart and surrendering, letting go. Surrendering doesn't mean submit, become a slave, become a fanboy or fangirl, run around, do whatever that person says. That's not what it means. It means to open one's heart and to allow awakening to happen, to just let go of all this effluvia in the mind and submit to a state of openness. That's all that means. And if we can't do that, then also we can't ever truly serve others. Because to truly serve others in a selfless way, we have to let go of what we want, what we think is best. We have to listen to those in front of us. What do they need? Our ideas about what they need are not important. We need to listen. What do these beings need? We have to surrender to what they need, to what is happening, what's really happening, not what we think is happening, So you also could call this devotion. You could use another word if you're uncomfortable with that word devotion, You could call it opening up, opening, being open-hearted, being loving, being connected. You can put this in any kind of words that you want, but ultimately, if we don't open the heart, we will be here a long time. To practice takes time. We don't have a lot of it. We may not have tomorrow. We all think we've got tomorrow. Like I myself, I've got work tomorrow. And I've got a list of things I have to do for work tomorrow. But I might not be here tomorrow. So making that list is quite pointless, But we go through this game as though we will have a tomorrow. We might not. So we need to really get this done. We need to really get motivated. We need to rouse ourselves. And that has, 3 steps. Accept our Buddha nature. Understand what that means for us, for the world. Do the practice. And we won't do that if we think, I can do it next week. I'm going to take a month off at the end of the year to do retreat. Then I'll do this. I'm going to a movie with friends tomorrow night, so bump meditation to the next day. That is having devotion to worldly concern, being utterly and completely devoted to a delusion that there will be a tomorrow, that this effluvia in the mind is somehow important. We're currently devoted to that stuff. All I'm suggesting is a slight shift of that devotion. I have some friends who I'm not going to, name and shame them, but who just, love certain celebrities. I'm not going to name and shame the celebrities either, but just devote. I mean, it's devotion. Also likewise, my friends are not necessarily like this because I don't have sporty type friends, but devoted to their football team. Just devoted. They buy the scarf, they've got the beanie, they go to all the games, rah, rah. I'm being silly because I don't know what it even looks like, that kind of devotion for a sporting team, but they have it. People are devoted to certain celebrities, pictures all over the wall, their little hearts palpitate when they see them. If you look at footage of people at a concert, like a Beatles concert or a Rolling Stones concert, or for me, David Bowie concert. But these days, like an NSYNC, that's even so old. I'm so old. K-pop, let's say, a K-pop concert, Korean pop concert. These people are like so devoted. They wouldn't call it that though. They've surrendered to the moment, to the experience. They've completely surrendered to it, and they have complete devotion for those completely ordinary worldly things. And then we also have devotion towards like money, our jobs. Those are not going to get us anywhere. So we need to try and have some sort of devotion for something that will help us and will help all sentient beings. I hope that doesn't sound kind of like hardcore or something. I'm not saying don't go to the movies with your friends. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, as Hermione said in Harry Potter, get your priorities right. I know it was Ron Weasley who said that. Get your priorities right. Our priority should always be practice, not having coffee with friends. Coffee with friends is fine, but it should not be the thing we're looking forward to that day. On any day, we should be looking forward to connecting with our true nature, which is the only thing that, according to the Buddha, in that first quote I shared with you, will bring actual, real happiness. The only thing. There is not a single atom in samsara that is worth our time. Our time is incredibly precious. It passes like that. Some of you are probably thinking, yes, I've just wasted an hour of it with you. But it's gone. More valuable than diamonds. Like so much more valuable than diamonds. It is gone. More of it gone just then. You can't bank it up. There's a limited supply. It's not sustainable. You can't grow more. So use it wisely. We need to rouse ourselves and get motivated to look to our true nature, to look to the purity upon which the world is founded, to look within and find happiness. If we don't do that now, there may not be a tomorrow. We might not get another opportunity. This is it. This is where we are now. We've had the great pleasure and fortune to connect with the Dharma. which has these profoundly simple methods to find freedom. So profoundly simple, it's not funny. But we go, whatevs. I'm going to learn an elaborate puja ceremony and take 12 years to learn how to do that and that and that and that, when we just could be sitting and looking to our nature. So I think I will wind it up there because we've done an hour. I'm happy to have you all talk at me now, if you would like, or if you have any questions. There's nothing in the chat. Any questions, any concerns? No. All right, so let's do a bit of a dedication. So in the Tibetan tradition, we always start by setting our intention, are mindful of our intention throughout, which is to recognize our own nature so that we can help others to recognize our own nature so that we can all be free. Then we dedicate at the end. And the reason this works, the reason this is not just a mind game, is because of interdependence and emptiness. We are not separate. That's it. So if we have a positive intention and we share the state of practice with all sentient beings, they do share in it because we're interdependent. We're all interconnected. There's no separation between me and you. So when you all become enlightened, many, many, many years before me, I will benefit, because every being that becomes enlightened adds to the awakened nature of all beings. It's not like that, really. Makes it easier. Let's put it that way. Makes it easier for everyone else to become enlightened. So there's a tipping point that we're working towards, at which point so many beings will be awakened that all the others will just wake up, you know? So we're all interconnected. So setting our intention, remaining aware of our altruistic intention throughout, and then dedicating at the end. It's really important because it keeps us clear about what we're doing and why, but it's a recognition of interdependence and that we all move towards this state of awakening for each other. We're doing this together. And whenever anyone achieves it, makes it easier for everyone else. On the ordinary level, yes, because they can teach, they can share, you know, they can lead, but also on the level that we can't see, you know, the fact that the self that we think is sitting here, right, is not sitting here. That's not what's really here. What's really here is fundamental, primordial, perfect awareness, the enlightened nature, expressing itself in this kind of, in these myriad forms, you know. So the dedication I do is quite a simple one. I could share it in the chat, but I think I'm going to just do mine quietly. Or I can do it out loud and you can just share it do it with me if you like, but mine's particularly Tibetan. So what I do is, by this effort, may all beings abide in the perfect bliss and equanimity of their true nature. Okay, you can do any version of that you want. You can just go, may all beings be happy. May all beings be free of suffering. May all beings know love and kindness. It doesn't have to be any particular words, and it actually doesn't have to be words at all. You can just dedicate, open your heart, share the benefit of whatever we've done here together. Okay. Okay, so thank you everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.